We have started explaining the title of Sahih al-Bukhari, which allows us to understand the methodology that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah implied in his Sahih, and the conditions upon which he based his Sahih, his book as Sahih. And we studied the first three words that are found in this title: al-Jami', al-Musnad, al-Sahih. And we stopped at the third word, which is al-Sahih, and now we will continue inshallah with the fourth word, which is al-Mukhtasar. Al-Jami', al-Musnad, al-Sahih, al-Mukhtasar. And Mukhtasar meaning summarized, something that is summarized. And in this is proof from Imam Bukhari rahimahullah himself that he did not set out to compile all authentic ahadith that he knew and entered them into this book of as-Sahih. He himself knew authentic ahadith, memorized authentic ahadith that he did not enter in his book of as-Sahih. Rather, he based this book upon selected ahadith on specific based on specific conditions and criteria, that some of which we have alluded to and mentioned. So there's no doubt that there are a lot of authentic ahadith that are outside Sahih al-Bukhari, that are outside Sahih al-Bukhari. And we heard the statement of Imam Bukhari himself when he said, أحفظ 100,000 hadithin Sahih, that I memorized 100,000 authentic ahadith. And it will come when we mention the number of ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, that if we take just this statement of Imam al-Bukhari, that he memorized 100,000 authentic ahadith just in his memory. If we take this number and look at the number of ahadith that are present in Sahih al-Bukhari, we will find that they do not even reach 2.5% of this number. The number of ahadith that are found in Sahih al-Bukhari are almost only 2.5% from the number of 100,000 ahadith. So this shows that Imam Bukhari, he did not mention the vast majority of the authentic ahadith that he had memorized and that he knew. He did not enter them into this book, Sahih al-Bukhari. Now we will mention the number of ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, since we have mentioned this percentage. The number of ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari that are not repeated, are 2,602. 2,602. This is the number of ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari that are not repeated. As we said, from the methodology of Imam al-Bukhari was that he would repeat a hadith based on the fiqh that is present in that hadith. So a hadith can be of various sentences, each sentence referring to a specific chapter from the chapters of fiqh. So he will repeat this hadith, but he will repeat it with additional benefit. Either there's a change in the chain of narration, this hadith he narrated on this sheikh and that hadith he narrated on another sheikh. Or there's addition or subtraction in the words, there's a difference. And if he found no way, then he would make this hadith into a hadith mu'allaq. He would erase or hide one of the narrators of this hadith from his sheikh, from his teacher, until the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in order to differentiate the hadith and in order to not repeat something without benefit. So the non-repetitive ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari are 2,602. As far as all the ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, along with repetition, then there are 7,397. 7,397 ahadith. And total. And these are the musnad ahadith that we said, that are upon the shart, the condition of Imam al-Bukhari. These are ahadith that are muttasil marfu, that have a connected chain of narration, and they are on the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if we were to add the mu'allaqat, as we said, they're outside of the condition of al-muttasil or al-musnad al-sahih. So if we were to add al-mu'allaqat to this number of 7,397, we get a number of 9,082. 9,082. So one who is good in math, if 9,082 were subtracted from 7,397, we are left with 2,000, almost 2,500. Almost 2,500 mu'allaqat. Some brother asked for the number of mu'allaqat in Sahih al-Bukhari. So this is the rough estimate of the mu'allaqat, the asanid or the hadith that Imam Bukhari almost 2,000 mu'allaqat in Sahih al-Bukhari that Imam Bukhari hid the chain of narration from these asanid. And this is where did we get these numbers from? These are the numbers that Imam al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani mentioned in his book Fathul Bari. The one who we said is a scholar who is from the scholars of al-Istiqra al-Tam. He read Sahih al-Bukhari from the beginning to the end several times, letter by letter, and he benefited us with these numbers. In the end, after we have finished the title of Sahih al-Bukhari and mentioned in severe briefness some of the main issues related to these words and some of that which Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is known with, and that which differentiates him from the other scholars of hadith, we will mention at the end some of the books that serve this book of Sahih al-Bukhari. The ulama, the scholars, have authored several books in service of this great book of Imam al-Bukhari. And in reality, there is no book after the book of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala that has been served, that the ulama have authored regarding than Sahih al-Bukhari. After the book of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala comes Sahih al-Bukhari. And from the students of knowledge of our times, there are those who have tried to gather these efforts and these books in one book. All the efforts that have been done on Sahih al-Bukhari, they have to try to gather it and mention it in one book. From that is the book Ithaf al-Qari bi Ma'rifat Juhud al-Ulama ala Sahih al-Bukhari. Ithaf al-Qari bi Ma'rifat Juhud al-Ulama ala Sahih al-Bukhari. Meaning gifting the reader the knowledge of, or allowing him to find out the efforts of the scholars on this book Sahih al-Bukhari, and it is by Sheikh Muhammad Isam al-Hasani. In this book he has mentioned 375 books that have been written around Sahih al-Bukhari. How many books? 375 books that have been written by the scholars, the well-known famous books that have been written by the scholars around Sahih al-Bukhari. And this book was published almost 15-20 years ago. So one can imagine the number of books that the ulama have written around Sahih al-Bukhari in the last decade or two. So we say that the books that the ulama have written around Sahih al-Bukhari, there are various types and of various categories. The first, we will start with the shuruh of Sahih al-Bukhari, the explanations of Sahih al-Bukhari, because this is the most important of them. For one to benefit from this book, he should refer to the explanations of Sahih al-Bukhari. I want to ask you, does anyone know the oldest explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari, the oldest sharh that was written? Ahsantum. Huwa alam as-sunan. Alam as-sunan. And this book is by Imam al-Khattabi. Imam al-Khattabi, who passed away in the year 388 after the Hijrah. meaning that he wrote this explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari almost 130 years after the death of Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah. Alam al-Hadith of Imam al-Khattabi. And this book is published in 4 volumes. From the, we have a huge list of books, but we will, in light of the time, we will try to summarize as much as possible. From the most important of the explanations of Sahih al-Bukhari is the book Fathul Bari. The most important of the explanations of Sahih al-Bukhari is the book Fathul Bari fi Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari of Imam al-Hafidh Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who passed away in the year 852. And this is such a great book that his student Imam al-Sakhawi, the student of Ibn Hajar, he said that if Imam Ibn Hajar did not author except Fathul Bari, it was enough as a proof for him. Enough as a proof for the great status that he reached in this knowledge of hadith. And Imam al-Hafidh Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani compiled or authored this book from over 1200 sources. He had 1200 books, manuscripts and otherwise with him, from which he compiled the explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari. This huge number of sources, a lot of them have not reached us. A lot of them have been lost, have not reached us, and there is no source of these books except Fathul Bari. If someone wants to find anything from these books or some statements, he has to refer to Fathul Bari. And from the benefits is that Imam Muhammad bin Ali al-Shawkani, rahimahullah, from the great Aimma of Islam, from the last of the Mujtahideen scholars of Islam, who passed away in the year 1250 after the Hijrah, almost 200 years ago, almost 200 years ago, from the last Khatimatul Mujtahideen, he was asked to write an explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari. His students asked him to write an explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari, and he has several books, countless books, and he was, if he wanted to, he was more than deserving of writing an explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari. But he said a very famous statement that is repeated by the scholars: La hijrata ba'd al-fath. La hijrata ba'd al-fath. This is a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that hijrah, migration, was prescribed, legislated in Islam from Mecca to Medina. But when Fath Mecca, the conquering of Mecca, occurred by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims, the hijrah was not prescribed and legislated from Mecca to Medina, because Mecca became a land of the Muslims. So Imam Shawkani used this hadith in another way, saying La hijrata ba'd al-fath. As there is no migration after Fath, there is no explanation after Fathul Bari. There is no explanation after Fathul Bari, and this great book Fathul Bari is published in 13 volumes, and it is something that every student of knowledge and everyone who wants to benefit from Sahih al-Bukhari should refer to. From the books that have been authored on Sahih al-Bukhari are books that relate to the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari, the men or in the chains of narrations that Imam Bukhari has mentioned. So there are books that have just been authored on the shuyukh of Imam al-Bukhari, his teachers upon whom he narrated hadith in this book. So from the most famous of them is the book Asami man rawa anhum al-Bukhari li of Imam Ibn Adi. And then there are books that have gathered the narrators in Sahih al-Bukhari in generality, not just the shuyukh of Bukhari, rather all the narrators of the chains mentioned in Bukhari, from the shuyukh al-Bukhari until the Sahaba. So some of the scholars, and we mention this because we don't want to repeat it over and over, some of the scholars have combined, some of the scholars have written books just on the narrators in Sahih al-Bukhari, just on the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari, just as Imam al-Kalabadhi. Imam al-Kalabadhi has written in his book Al-Hidayah wal-Irshad, Al-Hidayah wal-Irshad, in which he has compiled just the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari. Some of the scholars have combined with the narrators of Sahih al-Bukhari the narrators of Sahih Muslim. So that those books contain the narrators of both the Sahihain of Bukhari and Muslim, such as the book Al-Jam' Bayna Rijal al-Sahihain, gathering the narrators of the two Sahihain by Imam Abu al-Fadl Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi. And some of the scholars, and this is the most important one, some of the scholars have gathered the narrators of hadith of all the 6 books in one book. All the 6 books, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Ibn Majah, all the narrators chains, the narrators mentioned in these chains of these books, they have gathered it in one book. And from the most important of these books is Tahdhib al-Kamal of Imam al-Mizzi. Tahdhib al-Kamal of Imam al-Mizzi, which by the way, from benefit, he was the father-in-law of Imam Ibn Kathir. I'm sure many of you or all of you know Imam Ibn Kathir, the one who has the well-known famous Tafsir Ibn Kathir. So Imam al-Hafiz al-Mizzi, from the great scholars of hadith, he was his father-in-law, he married his daughter. So Imam al-Mizzi has a very important book, Tahdhib al-Kamal, in which he gathered the narrators of hadith mentioned in the 6 books. So if anyone wants to read upon any narrator from the narrators of hadith in the 6 books, all he has to do is to refer back to the book Tahdhib al-Kamal, and it is ordered in alphabetical order. Not just alphabetical order for the first name, every letter, then the name of the father, then the name of the grandfather, everything is in alphabetical order. So he goes back, takes this name, finds the chapter where this name is mentioned, then he'll find that this narrator, who from the 6 books of hadith have narrated his hadith, who from the 6 books of hadith have narrated his hadith. Then he'll find his teacher, shuyukh, his talamid, which is very important for what? For knowing al-ittisal. Al-ittisal, connection of a chain of narration. When you go back and you see that the shaykh that is mentioned in this isnad, is he mentioned Tahdhib al-Kamal? If he's mentioned, then it is muttasil. And if he's not mentioned, then you know someone has been left off. Understood? Then he'll mention his students, then he'll mention the most important part, which is the statements of the scholars of Jarh wa Ta'dil in praise or disparagement of this narrator, if it's thiqa or if it's da'if. And there have been several books written on Tahdhib al-Kamal after it. From the most important of them, Tahdhib al-Tahdhib of Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and Taqrib al-Tahdhib, which is summarization of this book in 1 volume. Which all the students of hadith utilize and continue to utilize till this day. From the books that have been authored on Sahih al-Bukhari are the mukhtasarat, those books that have summarized Sahih al-Bukhari. They are books that have summarized Sahih al-Bukhari. How do they summarize Sahih al-Bukhari? By deleting and erasing the repetition of ahadith. So they would delete the repetitive ahadith. Secondly, they would delete all the mu'allaqat and mawqufat, those ahadith that do not have a continuous chain of narration. Thirdly, they would delete the chain of narration. So they would just mention the sahabi, and Ibn Umar, and Abi Huraira, and that's it. They will delete the chain of narration. This is a way of authoring books of hadith which is beneficial for the general students of knowledge and general folk, because they are not in need of chains of narrations and all these sciences. So from the most important of these summarizations is the book at-Tajrid al-Sarih. At-Tajrid al-Sarih of Imam al-Zabidi. Imam al-Zabidi. And for your benefit, al-Zabidi. Al-Zabid is a city in Yemen. It's a city in Yemen, and many scholars have come from the city al-Zabidi. And for your benefit, many of the translations of Sahih al-Bukhari in English and in other languages, they claim that it's a translation of Sahih al-Bukhari on the title, but in reality it is a translation of at-Tajrid al-Sarih. It is a translation of this summary. It is a translation of this summary. At-Tajrid al-Sarih li ahadith al-Jami' al-Sahih. Li ahadith al-Jami' al-Sahih. From the books very important books that have been authored, or the type of books that have been authored, are kutub al-atraf, the books of al-atraf. Al-atraf is the plural of taraf. Taraf. These are books in which muhaddithin, the scholars of hadith, have organized the chains of narrations in alphabetical order. In alphabetical order. So they, for example, take the 6 books of hadith. There are several chains of narrations in these books. So they organize it in alphabetical order. So they start with the sahabi, who starts with the letter alif. Beneath him, the narrator who narrated upon him, the tabi'i, who also starts with alif. Beneath him, the tabi'i who narrates on this tabi'i, who also starts with alif, until they reach the authors of these books. So if one has a isnad from one of these books, he can easily refer to these books of al-atraf and find it a hadith, and find who also narrated this hadith in the other 6 books of hadith. So from the most important of these books is Tuhfatul Ashraf, also of Imam al-Hafiz al-Mizzi, the one who wrote Tahdhib al-Kamal. So he has 2 extremely important books that anyone who wants to research the 6 books of hadith, he should refer back to. One on the narrators, which is the Tahdhib al-Kamal, and one on the text and the chains of narrations, which is Tuhfatul Ashraf. So as I said, if someone takes a narrator, he has a hadith in his phone, on the computer he reads a hadith that Abu Dawud narrated on the authority of Abu Huraira that he said this. Okay? And he knows a narrator from that isnad. He takes a narrator, he goes to Tahdhib al-Kamal, he can find this narrator along with Abu Dawud, who else has narrated his hadith. So if he finds Bukhari along with him, then he knows that this narrator is a thiqah. This narrator is from the top levels of authenticity. As far as Tuhfatul Ashraf, someone has a change of narration, he goes back, he says, he finds a hadith that Abu Dawud narrated such and such. He goes back to Tuhfatul Ashraf, finds the hadith, he will find along with it who along with Abu Dawud narrated that same hadith. So he will find that Bukhari narrated it, Muslim narrated it, for example, Nasai narrated it. So this also benefits him, because if Bukhari and Muslim narrated it, then it is from the top level of authenticity. So this is the benefits of these books, and it is extremely important for every student of knowledge and hadith to refer back to these books. And we have skipped a lot of books due to the constraint of the time. And if anyone has any questions before we move on to the second book from the 6 books of hadith, Sahih Muslim, then they can present it now.
Some people, they try to look down on Imam Bukhari by saying that he wasn't faqih. But I read in one book that they said he was Sayyid al-Fuqaha. Where can we find that information? Because some people try to doubt this book.
There's a group from past times, from the earliest of times, that is called Ahlur Rai. Ahl al-Rai. And these are the people who are known today as the Hanafiya, the followers of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And they have a system in usul al-fiqh, in the principles of jurisprudence and in fiqh, that opposes the way of the Ahlul Hadith. So you find these kind of statements from past times coming from them, and until today, and it will continue until the end of times. Let alone Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, they have not left off some of the Sahaba. So from the most well-known statements of the Ahlur Rai is that they say that Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu was not a faqih. And there's nothing more greater than falsehood than this statement. If Imam Bukhari, that we just studied from his Tabwibat, and the way he used to derive fiqh from this ahadith, if he's not a faqih, then there's no faqih in this ummah. And Imam Bukhari is from the rare muhaddithin that the scholars of hadith, they have a specific name for them and they're called fuqaha al-muhaddithin. Fuqaha al-muhaddithin. The muhaddithin who have combined with strength in ilm al-hadith, reaching the top levels of ilm al-hadith, they have reached the top levels in the ilm of fiqh. And they are very few. From them is Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah. Rather, he is from the foremost of them. He is from the foremost of the fuqaha al-muhaddithin. And these scholars who have reached the top level in hadith and fiqh, they are also called Imam al-Aimma. The Imams of the Aimma. Imam Bukhari is also called Amirul Mu'mineen fil Hadith, the leader of the believers in the science of Hadith. So the book of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is between us. It is clear proof of the falsehood of this statement that Imam Bukhari was not a faqih. And as I said, the only reason they say this is because Imam Bukhari was not upon the way of the Ahlul Rai in usul al-fiqh and in fiqh. Now,
can you also throw some light on the manuscripts of Sahih al-Bukhari that reached us and like some of the most important ones?
Well, this is a very deep and vast topic. I don't think there's a book that has more manuscripts than Sahih al-Bukhari. And this is the reason that we say that the book that has been serviced the most after the Quran is the book of Imam al-Bukhari. And these manuscripts, some of them, as we said, have been lost. Some of them it has only reached a few pages from these manuscripts to us incomplete, and some of them have reached in totality. These manuscripts, the main point here is not the manuscripts, it's the riwayat. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he had students, and he narrated this book. He used to read this book upon his students for decades. So, and he used to, as we said, he authored it in 16 years. So he used to review it, change it, add it, subtract to it. So the student who heard one narration from him, it might differ on the other student who comes after him, based on Imam Bukhari's addition, subtraction, etc. So you have various narrations of this book. And from the most famous of this phenomenon is the book of Muwatta of Imam Malik. The Muwatta of Imam Malik, he had several students. He authored it in 40 years. And he used to recite it upon the students every time, adding, subtracting, revising like every author does. So a student could have heard from him the Muwatta and left with that narration, and someone else would have come and heard another narration that had additions and subtractions. So today for Muwatta, and a lot of these narrations are published, we have more than 5-10 narrations of Muwatta. You will see Muwatta riwayat Yahya al-Laythi, Muwatta riwayat Fulan, Muwatta riwayat Fulan, several narrations. You will find differences between these narrations. Some are hadith are present, some are not present, some are addition, some are subtracted, etc. So Imam Bukhari also has students, and they heard this book from him, and there's some differences between the narrations. So from the well-known narrations is the narration of Abu Dharr al-Harawi, Imam Abu Dharr al-Harawi, upon which Hafiz ibn Hajar Asqalani explained Sahih al-Bukhari in Fathul Bari. He explained Fathul Bari based on this narration. And this is other than the main narration that has reached our times. The narration that has reached our time is not the narration of Abu Dharr al-Harawi. It is another narration. So anyways, this is a vast topic, just a summary or shedding light on this vast topic. Now,
what exactly does mukhtasar mean?
Summarization, summary. Now,
so when you said Imam Bukhari was not faqih, and that's the claim Hanafi, right? So what, can you shed some light on it? What does it mean?
The Ahlul Rai, since the beginning of times, it is a school of thought that has been always been in opposition or different from the Ahlul Hadith. The Ahlul Hadith have principles in jurisprudence in which they derive their rulings from the Sunnah, from the Hadith. That's why they call Ahlul Hadith. From the Aimma of them is Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad. These are all from the Imams of Ahlul Hadith. Their fiqh, their jurisprudence, their school of thought, it is derived from the Sunnah, from the Hadith. Even though they have differences amongst them, they have some specific principles for one or the other. We don't want to go into details. The Ahlul Rai, the Hanafiya, they have a different system in which they derive their rulings from the statements and fatwa of their Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he has statements, he has rulings. So on those rulings, and from them they derive their jurisprudence. So if he made a ruling upon something and they find something similar to it, they do qiyas upon it, and they give that thing also the same ruling as the other original matter. So this is a difference that has existed since the beginning of times. These two schools of thought, the Ahlul Hadith and the Ahlul Rai. So the Ahlul Rai, they have always tried to diminish the status of the Ahlul Hadith and those people who have always served Hadith and lived for Hadith. And from the ways they have tried to do that is saying that they are not fuqaha. They do not have jurisprudence. Meaning that their jurisprudence is not based on the foundation and principles that they have established. So this is something they have said, and as I said, they have not left some of the Sahaba. It is something clear in their books, nothing hidden, when they even say that Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu was not a faqih. No.
Sorry. So a lot of time we get hadiths, like, on WhatsApp someone's spreads it, and they just mention al-Bukhari 1439.
Yeah,
what does that mean? Because you just
that
mentioned that
they
are explanation of the
of course,
right, and no one is going to the original.
In Arabic, there's a difference between al-azu and al-takhrij. Al-azu and al-takhrij. Azu means to ascribe this hadith to its source. To ascribe this hadith to its source. So you have a hadith, they'll write beneath it Sunan Abi Dawud 1001, for example. This is ascription. This hadith is found in Sunan Abi Dawud with this number. This is al-azu. But in reality, this does not benefit the reader, the layman much. Rather, it is befitting that takhrij is done for this hadith. Takhrij means to rule upon this hadith. The scholars or the students of hadith, they gather the chains of narrations of this hadith, and based on the principles that we just mentioned, they will rule upon this hadith. So it is befitting that takhrij is made of a hadith and not just azu. If it is said that this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, then there's no need of ruling upon it. If they say Sahih Bukhari number, then this is acceptable. We don't have any. This is something that the ulama and the ummah has accepted, as we mentioned. The ummah and the ulama have accepted everything in Bukhari and Muslim to be authentic. But the books that have not just compiled authentic ahadith, that we will see inshallah, from the conditions not to compile authentic ahadith, like Sunan Abi Dawud, he clearly says that we will study that he did not wish to compile just authentic ahadith. He has a specific methodology that we will mention. So these kind of ahadith, it is from the responsibility of the sender that he should find a ruling upon it before sending it to others. And no hadith can be acted upon except that it is established to be authentic. At the least, if he's not a student of hadith, then he should narrate the ruling from one of the scholars of hadith. Narrate the ruling from one of the scholars of hadith, from the past generations or our times, like Allama al-Albani, rahimahullah, other than them. This is the least. This is the least that a person should do, that he should let the reader know what is the ruling of this hadith.
So like if we if we get a WhatsApp message for al-Bukhari, that's fine. But if I get Sunan Abi Dawud, number this, you should not spread it.
Yeah, unless you know the authenticity of that hadith, you should not act upon it or call people to act upon it. Spreading it is something different. A person can spread it to a student of knowledge to look into it. He might have other reasons.
Forward the message.
Unless it is established to be authentic, then you should not act upon it or tell others to act upon it. Because we learn, inshallah, that these books, other than the Sahihain, they have not just collected authentic ahadith. From their own statements, we'll study that, inshallah. No.
What's the proof that all the Sahaba were mutqin in their hifz?
This is the tazkiyah of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to them.
So there's absolutely no chance that any of the Sahaba
No.
were not mutqin?
No. Adala and Dabt. Al-Adal, Ad-Dabit. We mentioned that the narrator, there's only two conditions that every narrator of hadith should fulfill. There's no other third condition. He should be Adal, Dabit. He should be trustworthy in his religion, and he should be a memorizer of hadith. The scholars of hadith, they use adal, trustworthiness in a vast meaning. So they include dabt, memorization in it. So we have the science of al-jarh wa ta'dil. Al-jarh wa ta'dil. They didn't say al-jarh wa tawfiq. Thiqa, which includes adl dabt. They said ta'dil. Only adala, only trustworthiness. Because it includes in this vast meaning dabt, memorization. They'll rule upon a narrator by saying huwa adl. You will find in the books of Jarh wa Ta'dil that they will rule upon narrators by saying adl. Yani they will say thiqa, hujjah, hafiz, adl. So the adl here does not just mean he's trustworthy in his religion. It means, it includes his memorization. So this is a specific meaning they use adl in, that it includes memorization, and the same can be said about the Sahaba. The Sahaba kulluhum udul. All of them are udul. So this trustworthiness includes their memorization. The Sahaba, all of them, there's no book of the narrators of hadith, Jarh wa Ta'dil, that you will find Sahaba mentioned in them. This is from the benefits. The scholars of hadith have written specific books for the Sahaba. Specific books just for the biographies of the Sahaba, in which they mention no statements of praise and disparagement. Jarh wa Ta'dil, none of it. Everything related to Jarh wa Ta'dil is from the Tabi'een until after them. Tahzib al-Kamal, etc. You will not find the Sahaba. The Sahaba are in specific books that the scholars of hadith written just for them. Understood? No.
I have a question. No. My question after.
Oh, tayyib.
I was just going to say for the brother and just for our knowledge, I know there's a misconception out there that, because there are people ask, the non-Muslims, I'm in Dawah, so they ask us, oh, how do you know they're collectively, the Sahabas were, they didn't lie.
No.
Or they didn't make mistakes and all this stuff. So we're not saying that the Sahabas are perfect. They are perfect in when transmitting the deen.
No.
But as human beings, they made errors because they're human beings.
No.
Right? But when it comes to the knowledge of the deen, Allah has testified for them that there is no mistake on their transmission.
No.
Collectively, all they convey the message together. But if one Sahabi was drinking alcohol, that doesn't affect the deen. That's his personal issue. Just want to add that.
Jazakumullah khair. No. I think we should continue and leave the questions after.